Hi, everybody. Today we are going to move into Chapter 9, The Pilgrims Come to America. In the last chapter, we learned about this colony called Georgia. And James Oglethorpe was wanting to create this colony of refuge for people who were poor. What else? I want you to pause the video for a second because we're going to have a quick partner talk. What else did he want for this colony? He wanted to create this area of refuge or peace for colonists that were poor. But what else did he hope for the colony? All right. After you have discussed, you may have said that James Oglethorpe did not want slaves in the Georgia colony, and that would have been correct. So even though he did not want slaves in the Georgia colony, they still ended up with slaves, and that was because they realized that rice is the only crop that they can grow, and rice requires a lot of workers. And as we know from the other chapter about South Carolina, that the slave owners, the plantation owners, they want to keep as much money or profit as they can. So they're going to get workers that they don't have to pay. They're going to bring over slaves. So today we're going to talk about the New England colonies, which are circled right here. And we can see that this is Rhode Island, Massachusetts, also up here in New Hampshire. We're going to talk about a group of people called the Pilgrims and how their motivation or their reasoning to come to America was a little bit different from the colonists that we've talked about before. So some important vocabulary for this chapter. When you hear the word cargo ship, that is a large boat used to carry things from one place to another. You see cargo ships today, but it's not really a ship that is supposed to be carrying people. It's just a ship that is supposed to be carrying materials or things. Contract. A contract is a written or spoken agreement, usually about business. So sometimes when I get you together to work on a group project, I have you start with this group contract, and that's an agreement of how you will treat each other and what you're going to do if you get behind on the project and what you do if somebody is absent. It's just a spoken agreement or a written agreement before you start working together. So we're going to see this contract happen between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans and what they agree to before they start living together. The last word is a vote, and that's a decision made as a group, usually by casting ballots, raising hands, or speaking out loud. So when we take a class vote, we make it private. We put our heads down on our desk, and then we put our hand in the air. If you vote for the governor, if you vote for president, then you cast a ballot. Okay, so the big question is, who were the Pilgrims and why did they sail to America? So I'm going to open this reading right here. And I just want you to listen and follow along. I'm going to stop at the end, and you are going to need to write an exit ticket. So we're not going to get through the entire chapter today. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The New England colonies. Do you remember the names of three regions? If you said Southern colonies, Middle colonies, and New England colonies, you are correct. Now we are going to jump over the Middle colonies and go north to the New England colonies. We will come back to the Middle colonies later. To learn about these colonies, we have to travel back to the fall of 1620 and meet the first New England colonists, the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims spent a great deal of time planning their move to America. At last, in September 1620, they were ready to make the voyage. So this is a picture, and it says that the Pilgrims thought long and hard about making the dangerous voyage to America. So the voyage that they have is so dangerous because it's not like today when you can get to a whole nother country in a day or two. This is going to be weeks and months of travel. Right, the Pilgrims. Land ho, the sailors cried. The passengers crowded onto the deck of the Mayflower. They wanted to have their first look at America. The Mayflower had been sailing for Virginia, but it ended up in what is now Massachusetts. A month later, the Mayflower crossed the bay. On a cold morning in November 1620, its passengers got ready to land. Who were these people aboard the ship? Today, we call the Mayflower's passengers the Pilgrims. A pilgrim is someone who travels for religious reasons. The people on the Mayflower had left their homes in England for a new life. The Pilgrims were not like the first Jamestown settlers. The first Jamestown settlers had wanted to find gold or other riches. Many refused to do hard work. They did not want to build houses or plant crops. They only wanted to return to England as a rich man. The Pilgrims were not looking for gold. They wanted to build houses and start farms. They wanted to raise families in a new land. They did not want to go back to England. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to have you pause the video. What was the difference between the Jamestown settlers and the Pilgrims? Pause the video and discuss with your partner. Okay, so some of you might have said, well, the Jamestown settlers wanted to find gold or other riches. Some of you might, and that the Pilgrims wanted to build houses and raise their families in a new land. The Pilgrims also, we're going to read in a minute, they want to be able to practice their own religion. Also, these Jamestown settlers that we learned about before, they want to go back to England and they want to be rich. But the Pilgrims, they don't want to go back to England. The next paragraph says, in England, King James made everyone obey the rules of the Church of England. The Pilgrims, however, did not wish to do so. They believed so strongly that God wanted them to worship in a certain way that they left the Church of England. They were called separationists. Let's pause for a second. Say this word with me. Separationists. Because they wanted to separate or break away from the Church of England. This was against the law, and they risked being put in prison. All right, this is our last page. Trouble for the separationists. When the king found out about the separationists, he was angry. He did everything he could to make their lives miserable. He even put some of them in prison. The separationists were afraid to stay in England, so they went to the Netherlands. But life there was difficult. People had to work very hard for little money. The people in the Netherlands spoke Dutch, and the separationists were afraid their children would forget how to speak English. About 12 years later, the separationists decided to leave the Netherlands. They wanted to cross the ocean and start a colony. In their new home, they would have their own land and could worship God in their own way. So here's a picture. This is a cargo ship. So as we said in the beginning, this is meant to carry goods or things. It's not really meant to carry people. So I'm gonna ask you one more question before we do our exit ticket. What problems do you think that would create? If this was supposed to carry goods and not people, what problems do you think would have happened on the ship? Pause the video and discuss. Okay, after you've discussed, you might have talked about how there might have been some safety issues, and there might have also not been enough space for the people on the Mayflower, especially if they're going to be traveling for months and for weeks and months at a time. So we talked about a little bit about how the Jamestown settlers were different from the Pilgrims, and how the Pilgrims, they want this religious freedom, they want to raise families, but the Jamestown settlers, they want to go back to England and they want to be rich. In your own words, what I'm going to have you do, I want you to write one full sentence in your writer's notebook. The Pilgrims came to America because. So thinking about the Jamestown settlers, they some of them might have been indentured servants. Some of them might have come for riches or land. But the Pilgrims didn't really come for these reasons. I want you to think about what we read. What reasons did the Pilgrims come for? Please use the Pilgrims came to America because as your sentence starter.